Welcome to Compliance Uncomplicated, an interview series dedicated to simplifying the unnecessarily complex world of risk and compliance. Hosted by Drata experts, each episode will tell a new story about high-growth startups and other brands that are building compliance pathways towards a culture of security. Every business, industry, and team has unique challenges when it comes to building trust. And for many startups, compliance is one of the first stepping stones towards that pathway. In each episode, we'll hear from founders, visionaries, and those tasked with building a foundation of trust for their brand. It's time to unravel the jargon and abbreviations and uncomplicate compliance.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Compliance Uncomplicated, which is a podcast that's centered around how startups and other companies are using compliance to accelerate business goals, build trust with customers, and create a security-first company culture. And I'm Kayla, your host for today's episode. I am an SDR manager at Drata. I absolutely love Drata. And I'm going to introduce my co-host, Tamisha Young. Tamisha, can you share a little bit of background with our listeners?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kayla. I am Tamisha Young, the Senior Audit Alliance Manager at Drata, and my role really is to connect our thousands of customers with auditors that meet their needs. Basically, about 80% of our customers find their auditors through Drata, and really my role is to make sure those auditors have the resources and tools and training to be successful using our platform. So that's a little bit about me. I'm really excited about today and the opportunity to introduce one of our customers. So today on the podcast, we have our guest, Audra Nariunaite, who is the Director of Compliance at Oyster. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
So, just to give you a little background, I have a background in cybersecurity and internal auditing. So I was really excited to really learn about your career. And I think this is a great opportunity to really kind of tell us about you, how you got involved in cybersecurity.
Awesome. Thank you, Tamisha and Kayla. Pleasure to meet you both. So we are talking same love for Drata, much love from my side as well. I have to say that I'm one of those people who have a bit of a non-traditional background, finding my way into audit, compliance, cybersecurity, all those amazing things. Being Lithuanian who currently lives in the United States, I was raised by very artistic parents. I think I somewhat disappointed them when I took a career path that led me through a background degree in organizational psychology to MBA with finance focus. So I'm very glad that I still get to enjoy art as my weekend and perhaps free time adventures. I love traveling, so I always try to visit all the modern art museums. I also bring my love for art and visual conversations to compliance and board reporting. So shout out to all my former bosses who patiently listened to me telling them that these graphs need more breathing space on the slides and supported me being able to combine both passions for compliance and audit. On more serious note, I guess I do find that this profession is something that truly allows me to focus on process improvement and look at the organization-wide processes. So I started in finance. I had a stop in HR analytics, and I always enjoyed looking how organizations spanning processes operate effectively. So in finance, we always look at, okay, how this budget flows from one point to the other. In HR, we look at human capital. And I discovered pretty accidentally that there is a profession called compliance that allows you to look at organization as a whole and help them be more effective in their processes. And since that joyful discovery, I spent quite a few years in healthcare compliance. I've been in risk and audit for one of the major railroads here in US. And Oyster is my most recent adventure where I decided that it is on my path now to try the startup universe and bring all those learnings and also learn and grow with Oyster when it comes to cybersecurity and compliance.
Yeah, and I think something that you said that was really interesting is your parents really wanted you to go in the arts, and you see many parents pushing their kids into like STEM or into science or a different field. So it's really interesting to get that perspective. And I noticed you're coming up on about like 10 years in compliance, and currently you are the compliance director at Oyster. So how do you think your background has helped you in your role?
So I think it's both mix of like my personal passion for things running smoothly and my experience in organizations that had to scale quickly. So having spent a chunk of my career in private equity owned healthcare company, I have gone through multiple mergers and acquisitions, and you wake up one morning and you no longer have 500 locations, you have 800 locations because you just acquired another company. So it was incredible to see how thoughtful we had to be about each process, whether I was in finance or compliance. We had to say this process works now with this many people, this many stakeholders. Will it work later if something changes, if we will add more variables to it? So I find coming to the startup world and building out the compliance program, going through SOC 2 compliance with Drata, it was really interesting to take that same look where, okay, we have processes, we are small, we're going through hypergrowth stage. How do we set ourselves for success by building really strong foundations with that eye of will this still function if we have more systems, more employees? I think it's really, really good learning that I had to learn sometimes the hard way early on. And now I can look back at it and say, like, yeah, I remember how we thought this would work, and the manual process is still good enough. It's like, might as well start a digital way back in the day.
Awesome. And, thinking about some of the experience you had in the past and maybe even kind of leveraging your former internal auditing skills, how did Oyster go about selecting their auditor for their compliance needs?
That's an excellent question. And as you can imagine, Tamisha, as you would be as an auditor, I was like, I'm so excited. I get to chat with other auditors.
Right.
Oyster has a really tiny compliance group. So as you can imagine, usually I am selling audit and compliance to other people. And now somebody's going to be selling audit to me. So extremely rewarding experience. So when we started our process by first finding the software partner, which was Drata. So I do have to mention, even at that stage, my audit background really drove me to choose Drata because they had really in-depth evidence. I don't know if that's one of the things that you appreciate tremendously, but having looked at other competitors, they would say, yes, your control is green because we say it's green. And it takes a while to figure out what behind the scenes documentation supports that green happy check mark. So having selected Drata, I really wanted to make sure that we are working with the audit firm that understands startup industry, that understands technology, understands globally distributed companies. For me, I wanted to learn and grow with them. So I wanted to bring my experience, but also be really open that I haven't done this industry in the past. So while interviewing several different partners, we were very much helped by Drata by giving us audit firms that work with Drata directly. But I also went out and reached out to some of the audit firms that I knew in the past, and it became pretty fast, pretty clear the difference on how audit firms approach those small startups without perhaps very mature environments yet. So some of them, if you talk with more of a big four level audit firms, they have like standard processes. They're going to give you their first, second year analysts to work with you, and they will do very standard process. Some of the other firms truly underscored how they are there to work alongside with you and help you learn. There is no right answers till the monitoring period starts. You're allowed to ask all the clarifying questions. You're allowed to talk through how Drata monitors things. And it was wonderful to see that firms that work with Drata also know the product well. So they can give you almost some of the advice that I was getting from Drata specialist. Also, the audit firms echoed, like, this is how the control needs to be set up. This is how it works. This is what we will be looking for. So I think it was just looking for the firm that was willing to engage and learn and grow with organization. At the same time, somebody who was willing to leverage Strata platform to the fullest extent. And we truly lucked out with our audit group. We have learned so much together. They were very instrumental in helping us have stronger controls than we would otherwise have if we didn't have all those in-depth discussions and learn from their knowledge in the startup industry. So we definitely lucked out. And I would say that for anybody looking for the audit firm, just make sure that you understand how much support you will need and don't be afraid to ask. As a certified internal auditor, I'm sure you've seen the same thing, Tamisha. Like, people want audit to be on this Mount Olympus and never give advice and be absolutely independent. That is true. That is what standards say. In reality, the goal is to make company effective. If we can get an advice that will help us be better and eventually be better partner to our customers, why wouldn't auditors provide that advice? So I think that I'm curious if that's kind of been your experience working with Drata as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of really kind of walked us through that. We try to make sure we have a diverse, list of auditors for our customers, from boutique, audit firms up to your big four. And so, really finding the auditor that fits your company and the level of support that you need. And all of that is very important. So I'm glad you were able to that Oyster was really able to find the right auditor for them through our auditor ecosystem. So great to hear.
Awesome. And then it seems like, right, you mentioned you should choose an auditor that will like work with you, support you. Do you have any other like quick tips for someone looking for an auditor on kind of what they should look for or how to make kind of that decision easier?
Absolutely. So a couple other takeaways for me would be make sure you are talking with people who will be working with you. So oftentimes, as we all know, there is sales team and then there is team that executes the audit. So it's very nice to be able to connect with people who will actually be working on your audit if it's possible. May not be possible in all cases, but just seeing their background, their experience, if they are more tech focused, if they are more SOC 2 or maybe more ISO. So really understanding who is the particular person that will be working with you and making sure there's a good match there of expectations and their time commitment. I think what was interesting is that some firms were very specific about how many hours they are willing to do the consulting aspect of the engagement versus the actual auditing. And some firms were saying a couple hours, some firms were saying unlimited. So just be mindful that you know how much you expect. And if there's additional cost of that, you may have to pay additional funds depending on the firm you select to get that additional guidance. So I think that would be the things that I wish maybe I knew before.
And I think that's really important because a lot of companies we talk to have never gone through SOC 2 or ISO before. And so keeping in mind kind of like, do you need that support going forward of kind of this unlimited support model? Because maybe you haven't gone through it and you need a lot of guidance, or have you gone through this before and you kind of don't care as much about the hands-on approach? So I think that's just something that's really important to think about.
Absolutely great advice. So let's kind of switch gears. We all want to know more about Oyster. So can you tell us more about some of the things you guys are currently working on and building?
Absolutely. So, Oyster is one of the wonderful mission-driven startups, which is what attracted me to join them almost 2 happy years ago. We are offering a software service platform for organizations around the world that allows them to easily access the talent that may not be available in the areas where they operate. Which means that people like me who left their home country looking for better career opportunities would no longer have to do that. And I'm so inspired by that mission every day, knowing that we are bringing jobs to people in a countries where they may not have had those opportunities in the past, knowing that companies around the world can truly get the best talent from the global talent pool. And all that is enabled through our SaaS platform, which means that they can be sure that information of the people working on their projects has been handled properly, that we have all the IT controls, all the privacy controls, all the good things that we are working for in SOC 2, that we are putting all that care in the information that both employees and customer companies trusted us with.
Awesome. And I guess going like, let's dig in a little bit more. Something you actually mentioned when you were introing yourself was that you love building strong foundations and scaling and working at companies that scale. And so I know obviously as companies scale, something that's really important is having organization-wide buy-in around security and compliance initiatives. And so in your eyes, what is kind of the best approach or your approach to create cross-departmental success when it comes to really building a security first culture?
So it's definitely a quest, right, for all of us in
Yeah.
audit and compliance. And I would say I learned many lessons the hard way of coming from healthcare, where in some ways compliance was honestly easier because there is such a strong regulatory environment. Going to other industries where compliance was not as expected and trying to figure out how do you sell compliance. I know selling compliance is a bit of a strong word because it implies that you perhaps are describing it to be something more than what it is. But I do think that an ability to internally talk about compliance in a way that connects with your stakeholders outside compliance is something that we all constantly try to hone our skills on, right? So a couple of the things that I found helpful is truly understanding priorities of departments not related to compliance, audit, legal. It's like, what is marketing doing? What matters to them? Brand awareness, reaching the right customers. What does organization want to be doing in several years, right? So understanding those goals that are in some ways feel perhaps not related to compliance. And I know, for example, at Oyster specifically, we had grown tremendously. So it was important that we have scalable processes, which compliance can help with. It's also, we are focusing, as we continue to grow, we are focusing on more middle market companies, which means we will be working with sophisticated customers who will have certain expectations. And one of those is SOC 2 compliance. So understanding that, and it is easy to say, oh, you have to be compliant. When our sales team tells us they want to reach mid-market, we can be there for the conversation. Perfect. Here's some of the things from compliance, what mid-market companies will expect us to have. SOC 2 is one of them. Let's work towards them. And honestly, holding on to this one idea that resonates with the teams outside compliance really helps. So then once you say SOC 2, just you both know how many things fit under it. We have to have effective training. We need to invest in a good training. We need to do all these other things. So taking something that resonates with external stakeholders and us as compliance and audit professionals knowing the universe that attaches to it, it makes it much easier to say like, yes, we are doing this because it supports SOC 2. And by the way, it also helps us with our internal control system. Yes, we have to have compliance and ethics helpline, again, as one of the preferred best practice for SOC 2, but it also means that now we have anonymous compliance and ethics helpline, that we have our compliance investigations policy, that we encourage people to talk with us. So really honing in on things that motivate organization and then being that partner. And I guess kind of finer point about it, I would say that how I measure my success is when other departments reach out to me saying, hey, I don't know if it impacts compliance, but I want to tell you I'm doing this. It's like, yes, I have reached them. So really that ongoing partnership and stepping outside of our role, which is sometimes maybe uncomfortable. We have to lean in a little bit, but I found that a very interesting way to grow.
Absolutely. I really like your approach and how you relate it to the job role in within the company. I think that helps definitely with the buy-in and really the understanding of how compliance affects the whole entire organization. So really kind of continuing on that on this same dialogue, how do you really navigate within the organization, helping your organization to understand the difference between security versus compliance? Sometimes that can get a little confused. So, how do you go about relating that to your team in regards to understanding the difference?
So for me, I always think that compliance is just really overarching concept. So security is a part of compliance as a framework overall. And I think maybe that's where I was so grateful to have gone through internal audit stop in my career journey, because it really honed into me the idea of control framework around the organization. So having security, you are covering part of the risk that the organization has. It is really important to have, but it doesn't necessarily address all the risks that organization has. So that's where compliance and audit help to kind of weave in security in the rest of the aspects of organization. So at Oyster, when we think about security, there is like very tactical initiatives of we need to make sure we have single sign-on, we need to do access reviews, we need to do everything else. And they are excellent partners in executing on those tactical goals. Where compliance comes into place, we are thinking about processes broader. We see the whole organization. So when our wonderful IT team is doing all the security controls, we support them by doing annual compliance training. We partner with them. We say, what would you like organization to know? What would you like them to know when they reach out to you? What do you want to tell them about how to approach security? And we make sure to integrate some of those learnings and be very proactive. So everybody's trained, they know the best way. I'm a believer that everybody comes to work wanting to do the right thing. So how can we make it easy for them to do the right thing, right? If we have too many steps and we're getting feedback that it's too laborious to do some of the tasks in order to be secure or compliant, this is where we need to step in and see if we can streamline some of the things, if there is any compromises to be made. And then again, kind of coming back to the fact that there is execution in the middle, we are being proactive. That's great. We have that item covered. What about being reactive? Realistically, we will have something that will go wrong. That's just the reality of the world. And with landscape and cybersecurity now, one day somebody is going to accidentally send an email with confidential information. Something is going to slip through the cracks. How are we going to react to it? While we hope it will never happen, we do have systems that we already set up, such as incident reporting. We have internal policies, how we will process incidents. We have roles, responsibilities. We do business continuity, disaster recovery testing. So that's, again, where compliance adds value. We are the people who look at the processes and think how things could go wrong and bring that confidence to the rest of the organization that we thought about the worst case scenarios and implemented at least some controls to alleviate whatever impact those situations would have.
And then I know you kind of talked about like execution, getting buy-in, and I've actually heard some really cool things about getting buy-in, about like treating sales and other teams as an extension of your team, really explaining to like the sales team what is encrypted at rest mean. But really, like, you have these kind of initiatives. And so I guess in terms of like buy-in, right, and getting buy-in from the org, how do you make sure that you are aligning your team's compliance initiatives to overarching business goals? And how do you really frame them as business drivers?
So in some ways, I think we are fortunate that we operate under OKR business reporting framework, which is objectives and key results, where we have objectives and key results that we measure, whether we met those objectives. It makes it easy for a compliance team to look through all the objectives around the company and find spaces where compliance could meaningfully add value. So some of the objectives are perhaps attracting more mid-market customers, which in that case, SOC 2, easy value add. Right? Also looking at throughout the company, where are some pain points that may not even seem compliant. So we had some really good successes with, as you mentioned, salespeople perhaps not being educated to the level that they could be about some of the cybersecurity items, and they have to answer customer questionnaires. And we realize that we keep getting questions from people across the org that sound like similar questions, like, sounds like you guys are doing the same thing. What is it that you're doing? Tell us more. Well, everybody is answering customer questionnaires about cybersecurity. So at some point, we streamlined that process by taking it on as a compliance task, but also empowering and educating our partners. So we know that customers are going to probably ask us due diligence questions. Let's ask early for them for the questionnaire, you guys. Having that relationship with sales, we're like, it's coming, just ask early so we have it. Check. It makes it easy, it makes it streamlined. Then we have a database of answers, which is very similar for what most of the security questionnaire software or kind of internal processes have. So we have a database where we have it public. If there is a really short questionnaire that salesperson feels they need to fill out in their time zone, and perhaps I'm not yet up in my time zone, they have the freedom to go in and look through the answers and fill it in, and then reach back out to us if they want us to review or if they need additional support. So really empowering people through understanding overall global organizational goals, but also being really open-minded about what compliance is and where we can add value, even it's somewhat less traditional roles. And then you get invited in the room where it happens, right?
Love it. And I think you just touched on something, right? Like, and this is near and dear to my heart because I am a salesperson, is the importance of like SOC 2, especially when I'm in these deals and having this, and kind of having the resource to win these deals without needing you all the time. And also I know you mentioned it helps you attract, as you're attracting more mid-market customers, they continually ask for SOC 2. So speaking of compliance and SOC 2, I know you all are type 1 and type 2 compliance, so congrats on that. So talk us through how Oyster approached becoming SOC 2 compliant.
It was an adventure,
Yeah.
Kayla, let me tell you. So, first of all, it was a learning for me because I was in a fortunate position where I was an auditor reviewing SOC 2s of other companies in one of my prior jobs. I was like, oh, okay, another SOC 2 to review. Now, having gone through it, I feel like next time I get the report, I'll be like, okay, good job, guys. I know what it took to get the report. So, I feel like it was some sort of a karma happening there. But so first thing for me, I am very organized. I guess that's Eastern European upbringing for me, and very project driven. So when we knew that we will start our SOC 2 journey, for me, the first thing was to define the scope of this project. What does it mean, right? We're going to have software support. We're going to have external auditors. We got through those hurdles. Then understanding how do we measure our readiness? Because we had this very ambitious goal of doing SOC 1 and SOC 2 at the same time, which means we got our SOC 1 report and started our monitoring period right away. That made it challenging, but I really wanted a team to be motivated to do this because I felt like it would keep us really focused if we just did it at the same time. Everybody's engaged, everybody knows that's what we are shooting for. So to keep that momentum going, we were very fortunate to start the discussions with our external auditors early on. So we had almost 9 months with them before we started the actual monitoring period for our very first SOC 2 Type 2. So looking at all the controls that were attached to Drata was easy. You guys made it easy, no doubt. I never experienced it being that easy because having seen it in organizations that perhaps were less modern or their tech stack didn't lend themselves to using Drata, I was amazed. Like, this is audit, future. Hopefully we can do more and more of it. But my important tip is remember that all the automated controls is not your main time investment, right? Data makes it easy. You actually don't need to invest time in those automated controls because you already see if they're green or red and you can adjust accordingly as soon as you see the flags. For me, planning ahead and having strong project around doing the rest of the work. So we have to have risk assessment. We had risk assessment, but we had to formalize some of the mitigation actions. That takes time. Making sure we formalize the policies for SOC 2. That takes time. That takes stakeholders. And stakeholders need to know that they will have to invest time in it. So being very early on, stakeholder management, the old project management professional courses that I took many years ago, stakeholder management has been drilled into me. So yes, trust me, our stakeholders knew that it was coming 6 months from now. And they're like, why are you telling me now? It's like, I just want to tell, just listen for me. I'm telling you, we're going to be asking you about policy 6 months from now. But it was really helpful to allocate all that time needed and not lose track and think that we are doing well just because we are pretty green in Drata dashboard for those day-to-day processes. So that would be my main advice of thinking through what will take you the most time. And unfortunately, some other things just gonna take time. They cannot be automated. Drata has great modules and they do have risk assessment. I know now, especially with the new module, but you will still have to find time on people's calendars. You will have to digest the information. You will have to write executive summaries. So that was really what I focused on a lot. And I was so fortunate to have a very supportive team helping me with that. And as we went through, we reached a really good point where we knew we were ready and we're ready to switch the button on and have type 1 done and check, and then have 3 months of type 2. And then I will have to tell you guys, this is my personal lesson learned. When we're done with 3 months, I was like, yes, we are set. We're going to do 3 months next year. Only to remember that you get 3 months only the first time. Your second year monitoring period is the 12 months. That starts as soon as your 3 months end. So I feel like this should be like a little pop-up for every professional going through it maybe first time. Like, yeah, by the way, now you have 12 months to work with. So it's been really rewarding experience. It was definitely made much easier due to Drata controls. But I would say we have not stopped working in Drata since our monitoring period ended. And now we have every week, it's either me or my wonderful colleague covering Drata controls, which means we are in there checking what's failing, what's going well. We are still planning all our annual policy reviews. So last step for anybody prepping for this, after you manage your stakeholders, you rally everybody, you get SOC 2 Type 2, please don't forget to mention to them that this is an ongoing exercise and they're gonna have to do the same thing next year. And we're gonna do it better because we have lessons learned, but also the infrastructure will change, the processes will change. So we will continuously talk with people about SOC 2. It's not one and done and you forget about it. I think people sometimes maybe want to forget about it,
Yeah.
but let's as their partners in compliance and audit, I think it's really important to constantly have it on people's roadmap.
Right. I love it. I think, it's a lifestyle, right? Like once you get into it, it becomes, a part of your everyday job and you have to buy into it. And I think from what you've said, really talked about how your organization understands that it is a part of the success of the organization. So you talked about some key things. Let's talk about some, I guess, some takeaways after becoming SOC 2 1 and 2 compliant, and then maybe some return on investment as well. If you can kind of think of some of those things um, after you became compliant.
Awesome. Thank you. So I guess I'll start with your second question, which is return on investment. Tamisha, I can't tell you the joy of the first time I got a customer questionnaire that asked all the questions, or at the bottom said, or give us your SOC 2. I was like, yes, this is what I worked for months. I will give you the SOC 2. So I do not have to answer SIGLite or any other version of 200 cybersecurity
Right.
questions. So that is a return on investment has been tremendous, not only for those time savings of answering the questions, because we all professionals, we know companies will still ask you to answer some questions. So realistically, SOC 2 will help you, but to a degree, not to the degree that perhaps we want to believe that you'll never have to answer another security questionnaire. You'll still be answering some security questionnaires, but you will have a power of SOC 2 behind you. Your sales team will also have a power of SOC 2. It's no longer long answers why you don't have SOC 2. It's an answer, yes, we have it. Here you go. Instant time savings that I don't know if we actually think about when we think about compliance and audits. Like all those long explanations that are required, if you don't have it, just go away the second you have it. So that is a great investment, and definitely return on investment and just the joy. I think that does fade because now we have newer sales team members who never had to explain why we didn't have SOC 2. So we just take it for granted. But for us, as kind of we talked, the work does not end. So now that we are done with the first year, the second year is really kind of building on it. So we had first year's risk assessment. Now I'm very excited to start working on the second year. We're going to be much more detailed. We're going to have perhaps more visuals around how we're remediating some of the risks where in the past it was just write-ups. We want to be more streamlined. We want to give leadership better view of where we are with our risk management as part of SOC 2. I think for us also, as we look through our tech stack, it continues to change. We continue to acquire new vendors. So being very mindful that we need to account for the risks and opportunities that they bring into the ecosystem as we continue to grow, and really just continuing to talk with all our stakeholders about what it means to stay compliant. So now we were compliant. There's going to be another audit and another review. And as I mentioned, we are very fortunate to have really great partnerships, but it is the work that we do every week. Like this week, today, my day is not going to end till I'm done reviewing Drata's dashboard to see if we have any other changes. So for example, we migrated from using Drata agent to using connected MDM solution, which is amazing because you guys offer that enhancement. And I feel we truly grown up. So even just as the platform shifts and grows, we want to grow along with it and really take the most benefits that we can from having the automations.
Well, we saved the best for last. You are truly a wealth of knowledge and have really given of some really good information for companies to kind of take and apply as they're making their decision about their compliance journey. So, what advice would you give to companies who are beginning this compliance journey and just really unsure where to start?
Thank you. That's excellent question. So I think to build a strong foundation, it's really important to have a roadmap and some goalposts that you can look at as you're considering the program overall. So I would say I have a bit of a non-traditional advice. It's not some beautiful COSO risk framework. It's actually United States Department of Justice guidance for effective compliance programs. And I promise you that's going to be the first link that's going to come up if you Google that. It is a long document, but it is very thoughtful and it evolved through the years. I have to admit, I don't love that it comes from the idea that if something went wrong and Department of Justice was investigating a given company. What I do appreciate is that they have a unique perspective of having looked at many companies, and especially the companies that may have had some challenges related to compliance and ethics in the past. So that guide really outlines what the compliance program should be, and it evolved tremendously through the years. It is interesting to see how it started many years ago with very basic guidance of just giving you elements of compliance program that talked about having policy and procedures, having chief compliance officer that reports to board of directors, having reporting, compliance monitoring, other baseline aspects that you would find in that guidance. But then it continued to evolve through the years. So back in 2020, there was added additional guidance about how things should be conducted. At some point, risk assessment made its way into the element of compliance program. So as this guidance continues to grow, I think it's really interesting to look at it and ask yourself questions like where we are as an organization. If we need to start from somewhere, having the 7 elements plus risk assessment is a really, really solid place to start.
Awesome. Well, I think that takes us to the end of our episode. And thank you, Audra, so much for joining us today. Where can people learn more about Oyster?
So please visit oysterhr.com to learn more about our mission and how we are making positive impact into the world. And I'm always here to chat with you guys if you want to connect on LinkedIn. Let's talk about building effective compliance programs.
Love it. And thank you so much, Tamisha, for co-hosting this episode, and catch us on the next episode.
Thank you both.
Thank you for listening to Compliance Uncomplicated, a Drata podcast. To learn more about the series, go to drata.com/uncomplicated. Discuss this episode on our community secured at community.drata.com or subscribe to our newsletter, Trusted, to stay up to date on the latest episodes.